Good morning and welcome to another of my Monday messages. My name is Rebecca. I'm a homeopath, a holistic life coach and natural health advocate. And my Monday messages are about me sharing some simple practices, thoughts, something to journal on, some health tip to help us all to work more towards our optimum physical, emotional, or spiritual health, and hopefully all three. So, welcome. And today is full moon. For those of you who are into that kind of thing, which I am. It's a very powerful moon. I don't know if you felt it last night. I certainly did. Very bright, very powerful moon, but it's actually at its peak today. And it's always a good time, the full moon, to do a bit of reflection and a bit of decluttering and throwing out what you don't need, perhaps having some kind of symbolic, ritualistic bonfire tonight, or just going out and just spending some time underneath the moon if it's clear enough, which I hope it will be. So I will be doing that later on this evening, and I'm wishing you a happy connection with the full moon today, if that's your thing. So today's message, I wanted to talk today about something that struck me as being a really useful tool, pretty much always, but particularly at the moment when there's so much conflict around, or it seems as if there is. Maybe no more than usual, but it seems to be perhaps quite vocal, both on a personal level and on a wider level in the media, social media as well, if you let it in. And generally in the news, there's a lot of conflict and division around, and that's not really healthy or helpful to anybody. So I know that can be quite overwhelming, and you can think, well, what can I do about, all of that out there? And it can make us feel a little bit powerless. But I wanted to just remind everybody that we can always work on ourselves on an individual basis, and we can work on how we deal or manage conflict ourselves, because it inevitably will come into our lives in some form or another. And it's particularly useful, I think, to look at how we deal with conflict in our personal relationships. So I'm talking about our intimate partnerships, whatever they might be, parenting for sure, especially when children get older, friendships even. And if you find yourselves perhaps feeling like you're kind of stuck in a very familiar pattern of conflict over a certain topic, or perhaps with a certain person, then it can be useful to recognize that, firstly, obviously, but also to be able to just call time out, to just have an agreed device that enables you to go, hang on a minute, this feels really familiar. I don't want to go down this route. How can we just call a halt to it and maybe regroup later when we've taken a deep breath, or whatever you feel is the right course of action. It's a kind of white flag, if you like. And I was reminded of this by watching a program that I love. I don't know if any of you know it. It's on Netflix and it's called Queer Eye. And it's a wonderful program, and one that I enjoy because it is so heartfelt and so helpful and very connected with how people are generally, and what makes them sad, what makes them angry, what makes them behave in the way that they might behave. But it's, for those of you who don't know, it's a group of men in the US who have lots of different individual skills, but also a collective skill, excuse me, and they work together to go into people's lives for a short period of time and just do a bit of a scan of what's going on and how they can help support them in getting out of any kind of rut or pattern or, behavior that is really keeping them stuck and not making them feel very good. So that includes perhaps looking at the way people dress and helping someone to dress in a way that is more reflective of who they really are. It's looking at where they live and all sorts of other things, what they eat even, but also one of the members of the team, lovely guy called Karamo, is his area of expertise, if you like, is emotional health. And he will go in and really get to the root of what is the problem here with this person? Why are they stuck? And this episode that I watched was lovely. It was a mother-daughter relationship, and there were all sorts of strands to it, but the nub of it for me was the fact that their relationship had really kind of fallen apart a little bit, because although they both acknowledged they really loved each other, and in some ways they were quite close, they were really stuck in both of them feeling that they weren't being heard, that they weren't listened to, that they were being judged. And every time they tried to talk about it, things just became an enormous conflict, and both people went away feeling dissatisfied and hurt and unheard and judged and all of those things. So it wasn't really getting anywhere. Anyway, I won't go into the story because that's another issue, but do watch it if you want to. But it reminded me, because Karamo, when he was speaking with them and going through this with them, he asked them to identify a word or an object that they could both say or hold up every time either of them felt that they were drifting into that kind of, okay, I'm feeling threatened now, I'm starting to feel angry, I'm starting to feel sad, I'm starting to feel shut down, whatever those things were, and stop it before it became too extreme. And when any of us are in those kind of feelings, we stop listening. We literally stop being able to hear what the other person is saying. So it becomes completely unproductive. And I think having some kind of device for all of us to have to stop it before it gets to that stage is very, very useful. Now, interestingly, they both chose to say the word Karamo, this guy's name. And I was thinking about why, and they found it very successful. Cut to the end of the story, basically that was a huge factor in them being able to hear each other and resolve their conflicts. And I thought about, okay, I wonder why the name Karamo was so successful for both of them. And my take on that is that because he immediately brought to both of their minds a reminder of what they both wanted to achieve, that they both knew that they loved each other and that they wanted this relationship to get better and to get closer and more connected, and for both of them to feel more heard and seen and felt. That Karamo was a shortcut to reminding them of the sessions that they had with him and what they wanted to achieve, and it immediately pulled them both up and enabled them both to stop feeling the way that they were feeling and say, okay, we need to cool it now and go and do something else, revisit it when we're calmed down or whatever, or to say actually what we're really feeling. And I think what gets missed when often people are advising, let's have a stone that we pick up, this lovely crystal. Let's pick this up, and if we pick this up, that means that the conversation's got to stop. And it often doesn't work because people get so immersed in how they're feeling usually, if there's anxiety, fear, panic, frozen feelings, shut down, backs against the wall, holding up a stone, unless it means something to you, is not really going to be very helpful often. I mean, it can be sometimes, I admit that. But so I wanted to just revisit the steps for creating some kind of pattern interrupt for any of you that felt that that might be useful to you. So I've put together 5 steps that I think would be helpful for anybody wanting a tool like that. And to be honest, actually, you'll see when we go through them, even if you are not in conflict with somebody else who's agreed to these steps, just having them in place for yourself can be useful. If you're just in conflict with somebody who you don't know terribly well, really, it's actually being conscious of your own white flag, your own timeout device, if you like. I'm using the word white flag because that obviously in battles and fights was a sign that, okay, this is a timeout, we're not fighting anymore, we actually would like to have a parley, we'd like to talk, we'd like to be heard, we'd like to actually explore perhaps how we can come to some kind of resolution that doesn't involve fighting. And that's exactly what this is. So it is a kind of white flag that I'm advocating here. I can see some of you on. You're very, very welcome. And you're welcome if you're watching the replay. So I'm going to go into my 5 steps. You might want a pen and paper, or you can always watch the replay if you like. And I will put a longer post later on this week where I'm outlining the steps more clearly. But the first thing, if you do find, perhaps in an intimate relationship or in a relationship with an older child, perhaps a teen or a young adolescent, or a friend even, that if you, in the time where you're not in conflict, so this is step 1, if you're not feeling in conflict and you both are able to have a conversation where you recognise that things are a little bit stark in some area, it's worth first of all identifying what's the overarching vision for this relationship. What do you want to have in this relationship? And if you can both just agree that, okay, I really want this to be a loving, respectful, kind relationship where we trust each other and we listen to each other, whatever it is, just agree those terms first. Terms seems a bit formal. It doesn't have to be. It's just a shared vision for what you would like this relationship to be all about. And part of that is identifying what that feels like. And that's step 2, really, for me. So the first one is to identify verbally or cognitively, if you like, what kind of relationship you'd like. And the second step is to think, okay, well, let's assume we've got that, or we do have it, actually, most of the time. What does that feel like? What does that allow me to feel when I do feel we have a loving, mutually respectful, kind, deep listening, nurturing relationship? And just, really feel into that. What does it feel like? And perhaps, maybe you could at that stage be thinking of, well, is there an object or a colour or an animal, a symbol of some sort that for me represents those feelings? So that's the third step, really, is to try and identify what that object or word or colour, anything at all, what that might be. Now, obviously, it's useful to have a word rather than an object if you can, because then it's there all the time. But it doesn't have to be, if it's something that you wear, like, I wear this necklace a lot of the time, which has crystals on it. Could be that. Doesn't matter really. It just has to, when you think of it, it has to bring up those feelings that you want to feel within that relationship, if that makes sense. And let me know if I'm making sense here. So those are the first 3 steps, really, is to have an agreed objective for what you want from the relationship, to understand what it feels like when you feel that you do have that relationship, the one that you want, and then to identify something, a word, an object, a colour, anything at all, even a hand gesture that epitomizes all those feelings. And ideally, it could be something that you both agree on, but it actually doesn't have to be, as long as you both know what that thing is, what that gesture or word or colour is. So once you've actually decided on that, then you need to have an agreement as to what's going to happen if we have mutually decided this lovely rose quartz crystal. Okay, this is my way of saying I need time out. If I hold that up, what do I want to happen? And that's a very important part of the process, because you both have to agree, okay, that means that we need to sit in silence, take deep breaths before we can speak again. It might mean that we both need to leave that space and regroup at a later time. It might mean that you need to hug or shake hands or turn on some music. It could be anything you want, but the aim is that you have a mutually agreed action plan in place. Because if you both are holding up your object, but neither of you knows what's supposed to happen next, then that can be a little bit discombobulating. So those are the 5 steps that I would advocate when you're trying to identify something that helps to break a pattern of conflict, particularly when you recognise it as something that you've been stuck in for a long time. And it will take practice. It really will. It's not going to come, instantly, because you're breaking a habit. You're gradually changing the way that you manage when you feel that you're in conflict with somebody. And you'd be surprised when you can have that tool and be able to use it, how much clarity it will also give you as to why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And I must add here, I am not for 1 minute suggesting that this is going to solve all your conflicts. It isn't. Conflict can be very, very complex, and it usually needs, one-to-one or very dedicated group work, which is something obviously that I would do in my coaching and in my mentoring, and particularly obviously in my homeopathic remedies can be brilliant pattern interrupters and allow us to become more conscious of our triggers and what enables us and what disables us. That's another story. Today's message is about giving you a tool that may very well help de-escalate things when they're rising to a pitch that you recognise is not going to go anywhere, never going to resolve anything, because you're both going to go off into your separate corners feeling wounded, basically. And that's not productive unless you can look at that and be able to move on from it in some way, be able to resolve the conflict that is triggering it. So I hope that all makes sense. It's a little bit of a mouthful or a headful to take in, perhaps. But I find it useful to just remember why I'm in the relationship that I'm in, what I want from it ultimately, and whether this current conflict is getting me closer to that vision or whether it's actually just taking me away from it. And if I can have a simple device that I hold up or that I feel or hear that says, you're going down that route again and you know where this leads, so let's just not do that, then it can change things, or it can start to change things for sure. So, and if you do agree on an object or a word, even for yourself, then if you're not with somebody that you've already made this personal, intimate agreement with, perhaps you're sparring with somebody online or whatever, hopefully not, but if you do find yourself in some kind of conflict, knowing when to walk away from it, knowing, oh, actually, I can feel myself getting sucked in here and this isn't going nowhere, rather than furiously type out something that's just going to leave you feeling rubbish, being able to go, okay, Karamo or Pink Stone might be enough to just remind you that you can just walk away. You can just not do what you've been doing if it doesn't lead you anywhere. So that's it, I think, for this morning. I think it's probably enough. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear if you're already practicing that kind of thing and you find it useful, or if you have anything you'd like to add to those steps. So maybe spend this week, just working out how to implement those steps productively for yourself, and see how your relationships might change if you don't just do the same round of conflict time after time. Okay, that's it. Wishing you a wonderful full moon experience and a lovely week. And I hope that you don't find yourself in any repetitive patterns of conflict. But if you do, just remember these steps. Okay, take care.